G'day YouTube, Baubles on a lot here. Those of you paying attention to the weather reports emanating from Australia have probably heard about the low pressure system that moved across eastern Australia on Monday afternoon and evening and blew down lots and lots of trees and knocked down lots and lots of power lines. Around here we got about 80 kilometres an hour of wind, and it provided for some particularly exciting times. As the wind came over the top of these trees, it contrived to produce a low pressure zone above the tent, which sucked the tent up. And as the tent is sitting on a crushed gravel pad, it means that not only did these 6mm diameter pieces of steel rod, 25mm from the bend to the end, which was securing the floor of the tent to the pad, pull out, but also these 10mm reinforcement rod stakes, which was securing the guy ropes, some of them let go as well. And when the guy ropes pulled out, what that meant was that the roof of the tent was able to rise vertically, and when the roof of the tent rose vertically, in the absence of the bracing wires connected to the battery box, which has 50 kilos of lead and water and acid in it, in the absence of those guy wires, the roof of the tent lifted the bloody flue off the top of the stove, which I'm sure was wildly exciting for my daughter, who was inside at the time. Muggins here. Well, I was over there in the hut, having just been fed and just gone back home and just been rung up by a lady friend of a mate of mine that I hadn't seen for years and years. And I'm on the phone, see, and I hear this beep beep, someone's trying to ring me up, and I kept on talking to old mate's missus, and beep beep, someone's still trying to ring me up. Must be a very persistent little telephone salesperson in Kathmandu, I thought. And the wind was howling and shaking, and I thought, gee, I better go and have a look at that tent. I poked my head out the door and had a look, and it all seemed okay. The light was on, the tent roof was up there, and just as I started to go back inside, the beep beep happened on the phone again, and then I started to hear screams, you see. I come running over here with a head torch, and the chimney was still going through the roof of the tent, but it was lying down on the ground as well, and daughter was inside trying to use pieces of firewood to try and hold the hot end of the chimney from touching the inside of the tent. And happily, when you pull the chimney off those things, there's no draft. So there was nothing to suck the flames and the smoke out, but it had filled the inside of the tent with smoke. And then I got dispatched to go and get some gloves, and once we had some gloves, we could hang onto the hot chimney and lift it back up and put it back in place. And then I got some wire and some pliers, and I tied the bloody top of the chimney to the battery box so that the tent is not capable of lifting 50 kilos of lead off the ground, so therefore the chimney can't come out of the top of the stove. But I've got to say, do you see the pussycat? Do you see the pussycat? That's Skitty Kitty. I have got to say that the Karma attached to the Karma Canvas company from www.karmacanvas.co.uk is that they get to be reviewed by me, and I say that they are absolutely up to shit when it comes to explaining to people how to fit the flue through the tent on the stove and the tent that they provide. And I also have to say that their idea of a guy rope is absolutely pathetic, and their idea of tent pegs are just laughable. Perhaps if you've got perfect loamy soil with small bits of gravel mixed in and maybe 50 mils of grass roots on top, not excessively wet, And if you got no wind, then yeah, what they had available, what they supplied, would do the job. Here, it's really only the tent pegs on the high side of the pad where there was minimal crushed granite, and basically you're tent pegging into this stuff. It takes you 9 goes to get every peg in because you've got to find a path between the rocks. Once you get into any sort of a fill type pad, so that your tent has got a soft base to sit on, then yeah, something this long, just bloody useless. Absolutely bloody useless. And when you're supplying a tent with a fire in it, and you've got a watertight gland for the flue to go through the roof of the tent, then you really have to think about some form of engineering to stop the tent roof from pulling the flue vertically up out of your fire. Otherwise, it's just absolute fucking negligence in supplying products that are not fit for use, not fit for purpose. And that's what Karma Canvas has done here, in my opinion. So the only thing holding that onto the stove is the weight of the pipes and the weight of the roof, and those 2 wires going down to the battery box. So my theory is I'm going to use these bolts here to make up an anchor point for a wire that comes down and goes underneath the stove and transfers the weight of the firebox onto this and this, so that there's no possible way that this can lift up and pull that joint off there or pull that joint off there, which is what happened. And yeah, only for the fact that my daughter hadn't recently stoked the fire, and only for the fact that there's no draft once you take the chimney off. It would have billowed out smoke and flames. As it is, you can see it's stained the tent, and the hot end melted a hole in the fly screen. But on the other hand, the whole system is still more or less intact. And here we have a 300 watt pure sine wave inverter to feed the lights and charge the mobile phones. Here we have a little kitchen nook with a cat food nook. And yeah, the idea of a pussycat on the endangered species sanctuary is pretty funny. But on the other hand, how much wildlife is a 17-year-old one-eyed cat going to hunt? And if I want my daughter to come and live at my place, then yes, her pussycat is allowed to come and live here too. So what's in here? 225 amp hours worth of storage. Battery charge controller that says we are fully charged and floating. And an 8 amp 12 or 24 volt battery charger plugs in to the 240 voltness of the powering cord, which comes over to a 100-mile-an-hour duct tape connection, which meanders its way all the way up to the now double parallel power cords, so we can drive under them up to the top of the tower of power to the plug going into the power board, so that when I'm running the generator to petrol charge my batteries, with this venerable old machine running on distilled essence of fossil juice, because given double Nina. Even the most well-intentioned hippies and hillbillies are unable to run their little scene on sunlight alone. But anyway, that is where we're at the moment. We survived. The tent did not get burned, but we both got a hell of a bloody fright, and Liz got a bigger fright than I did because she was there helpless with a mobile phone that wasn't succeeding in contacting me. And yeah, eventually I heard her screaming and came over to give what assistance I could. So that's the update on Daddy Warble's daughter child and this yurt life. All very exciting, and yeah, the yurt is moving ahead. And the pussycat is learning to live in it, and I'm learning to have a cat on the Endangered Species Sanctuary. And we only had a few trees knocked to the ground by the ferocity of the wind, and happily none of the trees that came down seem to have clobbered my fence. Thank you for that, small mercy, creator. And these ones over here, they've been down for a few months, I think. Although, excuse me, I misspoke. That one down there is a fresh one. This one here has been down for a few months. That one there, it was sort of halfway down. It's now come all the way down. But still, at least nothing fell on the yurt and nothing fell on the hut. So that's good, isn't it, Princess? And footling daughter child. So, about the only thing I have yet to show is the difference between the tent pegs as supplied and tent pegs commissioned by Warble Daddy. On the hypothesis that twice the length might give somewhere between 2 and 3 times the holding power. At least that's the great hope. And so far, in that wet decomposed granite, the new ones seem to be working out a whole lot better than the old ones. So, part 1, wires to weight the flue onto the stove. Part 2, new tent pegs to hold the bloody roof of the tent down in the first place so that it doesn't have enough slop and flop to be able to lift up and pull the bloody flue out of the stove. Part 3, a strap tying the roof of the tent to the bottom of the stove, so the roof of the tent cannot vertically increase the distance around the flue and pull the thing off its joints. Such is my theory, the theory that is mine, my theory. Theoretically, that might fix some of the bloody flaws in the Karma Canvas Company glamping yurt, which looks really great in the brochures, looks really great on the YouTube videos, and when you try to live in it in Australia in a storm, fucking terrifying, man. Fucking terrifying. I thought it was an Australian-made yurt, but it says on it, UK. It's a Pommy yurt. Sold in Australia. That's what I make from that branding. Such is life. Warble's on a lot to YouTube. We live and we learn, eh? Ciao.